Am I on the air? Can you guys hear me? Now, I've spoken here before, and they've recorded it audio, but this video thing is new. So how far can I wander before I'm off camera? Do I have the whole row? Okay. What if I hid behind the table? But
You're still there.
I'm still there.
Sorry.
Wow. All right. This is actually going to be kind of a continuation of what you just heard, honestly, from Cindy. You've been going through the Sermon on the Mount, as I understand, and I get to talk about Matthew 5:17-20, which is in the first chapter of the Sermon on the Mount, and it's Jesus talking about. Well, let's put it up here. Do we have it? One of the slides should be the other slide, please. Yes. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of Pastor Shannon and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. So there you go. Now, a couple questions I want to look at here. Now, Jesus is talking about the law and the prophets. What does he mean by the law and the prophets? Well, traditionally, the Jews divided their Bible, the Old Testament, into three big parts. There was the law, which was basically what we call the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Then they had the prophets, which was Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, the prophets. And then they also had a third, smaller section called the writings, which was the poetry, that's Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the book of Job. But that's small compared to the law and the prophets. So basically when Jesus says, I have not come to abolish the law and the prophets, he's basically saying, I have not come to wipe away everything that you thought you knew. I am not wiping away the Old Testament. Rather, I have come to fulfill the Old Testament. Now, the law. Okay, put that other slide back up, please. That little word there at the top, the Hebrew word, remember you read Hebrew you read it backwards, so you start on the right and read across to the left. That is Torah. That word says Torah. And that's what they would call the law. And actually what it really means is teaching or instruction. It was a very positive word for Jews. You know, the word law for us is not necessarily a happy word. I mean, it's not, you don't think, hey, law, great, give me more. But, you know, the teaching, the Torah, I'm going to move forward like a tiny bit. Is that okay? Because I keep thinking I'm going to hit that. All right. Yeah, this was a positive thing. In fact, they were very thankful for the law throughout tradition, Jewish tradition. If you read Psalm 119, which has like over 100 verses, in Psalm 97 it says, oh, how I love your law. It's my meditation all day long. The Jews liked the fact that the law had been given only to them, and it set them apart from other peoples. In Deuteronomy 4, 7, and 8 it says, what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call to him? What other great nation has statutes and ordinances as just as this entire law that we have? In Amos 3:2 it says, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. So for Jews, the law was great. It was this instruction. It was this guidebook. It was this thing that they had that nobody else had. And if you did the things that were in this book, then you would have life. In fact, even today, there are a lot of Jews, Jewish commentators that feel the same way. I remember when I was in seminary, we had a rabbi come and speak to us, and he was talking about the law. And somebody asked him, what do you think about Paul? Of course, you ask a Jewish scholar about Paul, that's not really their area of expertise. But they said, well, what do you think about Paul, viewing the law as kind of a negative thing? And he's like, well, we don't agree with that. It's like the law, the Torah is very positive. Do these things and you will live. It sounds like a positive to them. It sounds like a promise. They don't realize, man, this is a really long list of things I got to do. They don't look at it that way. Now, okay, so where do we get the word law? That bottom word there, that's Greek, that's nomos. When the Old Testament was translated from Hebrew into Greek, sometime before Jesus, they used the word nomos, which literally means law, to translate Torah. So that was the beginning of this change from this positive, life-giving teaching to this rather strict set of laws, was when they translated it to Greek. And then, of course, Paul takes that idea and he kind of works with it. Now, so there's, okay, what was the law and the prophets? That's it. They're talking about the teachings that were given and then the prophets. So Jesus says, I have not come to wipe all that away. I'm not here to just do away with the entire Old Testament. I'm here to fulfill this. So 3 questions. Do you guys have anything to write on? You have a pen? Here, write this down. 3 questions. Why was the law given in the first place? All right. Oh, they give you a bulletin, right, when you walk in? Does it say pastor in front of my name on there? You can cross that out and put the Most Holy Right Reverend if you want. No, I'm actually not a pastor. I'm not an ordained type of person. I did go to seminary though, so I have some clue what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's the first question. Why? Why the law? What's the point? Number 2, why does Jesus say he came not to abolish it, but to fulfill it? Because that's big, because a lot of times in our Christian culture, you know, our New Testament thought, we realize we don't need law for anything, we got Jesus. But Jesus didn't say, I'm going to get rid of all this. In fact, he said the opposite, I'm going to sustain it, uphold it. And then the third thing we want to look at just real briefly is, so what? What does this mean for us today? And how can we possibly be more righteous than professional religious scholars like Pharisees and scribes and Pastor Shannon? Okay, so that's it, your 3 questions. See, she's not here today, so I can make fun of her. Oh, wait. Oh, you guys did come. Oh, this changes everything. No, okay, why was the law given in the first place? Okay, write down Exodus 19 and 20. I'm going to give you some homework. Exodus 19 and 20. Just 2 short chapters. Read those sometime this week. It's inspiring. It's very eye-opening. It's the scene in the wilderness, when the Israelites, they come out of Egypt and Moses is leading them in the desert, and then God brings them to the foot of Mount Sinai, and he says, I'm going to give you, I'm going to speak to the people. And that's where he gives the 10 Commandments for the first time. Well, God gives the Israelites the extended law, in large part because that's what the people chose. Because if you read that story, it's interesting. God tells the people of Israel, if you listen to my voice and obey my commandments, you will be my people. He says that in Exodus 19:5. His intention seems to be that all the people will come up on Mount Sinai, and he will speak to them, address them as a congregation, and everybody's going to listen to what he says. Okay? In fact, he seems to think that people are going to be so stoked to come see him that they'll bust through the line and like rush the hill and come see him before it's time. Look at 1921 and 1922 when you read Exodus. Circle 1920. It says, don't let the people come up too early. It's like after the trumpet sounds, then the people may go up the mountain. His intention is that everybody's going to come up. So a couple days pass. They do this purification thing and everything, and then thunder rolls and the whole thing, and it's crazy, and the people stand back and they're like, whoa. And I mean, I'm not going to blame them, because chances are if I'd been there I might have done the same thing. I'm not going to be too harsh on them. But after God gives the 10 Commandments, the people are standing back, and they tell Moses, okay, all right, you go hear what he has to say, and then you tell us what he said. Now remember, God said, if you listen to my voice, you'll be my people. They don't want to listen to God's voice. They want to listen to Moses' voice. They don't want to hear from God. They say, man, if we listen to this dude, we're going to die. There's thunder and everything. And like I said, I don't blame them. But it says they stood back. And Moses said, God's just testing you. Come on up. We're back. We're staying back. We're not. In that moment, the Israelites choose not to be in direct relationship with God. That's basically the moment where they said, just give us a to-do list and we'll just don't talk, just write us out a to-do list. Good. And God said, okay. And from that point on, he tells Moses, tell the people, everybody, you have heard me speak in my hearing. From now on, I'm only talking to Moses. And after that, nobody else can go up the mountain. You know, that's where it starts, where this disconnect comes. Because if you think about it, there's two ways to be like somebody, which is what God really wants from us, right? At the end of the day, he wants us to be like him, to be holy as he is holy, to be Christ-like as his son. That's what he really wants. He wants a relationship of people who are like him in, not, you know, in a life-giving way, a loving kind of way. Now think about it. There's two ways that you can kind of get to know somebody well enough to be like them. One, you can live in relationship with them. You can interact with them. You can be with them. You can get to know them. You can live them. Or you can just have them write down a big long list of stuff. It's like, if you want to be like me, do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. How many people in here are married? A lot of people are married, right? Everybody? How many of you have a list of stuff that you have to do to please your spouse? How many? Well, okay, all right, bad example. No, but you think about it. You live with somebody and you learn and you make some mistakes and there's ebb and flow in a relationship, but you know what I'm talking about. You know somebody and you're with them and that's how they spread to you a little bit and you kind of start to reflect each other a little bit. But that's how you get to know them, by just living with them and being with them and not having a list of stuff. It's like, if you want to be my wife, you must do that kind of thing. So, in a lot of ways, the reason the law was given in the first place was because people preferred that list of rules over direct relationship. That's a lesson for us right there. In fact, in Deuteronomy, okay, the book of Deuteronomy is Moses basically giving this huge, big, long pep talk before they enter into the promised land. You know, they've been wandering in the desert. They're almost there. They can see it. Moses is like, hold up, got stuff I got to say. And he talks for 32 chapters. But in chapter 5, verse 5, he says, remember, I was standing between the Lord and you to declare to you the words of the Lord, because you were afraid because of the fire and did not go up the mountain. So Moses reminds them again, they basically chose it. And if you think of it think of it like a kind of a car, like God's driving the car, and we're riding in the car with God. Because prior to the giving of the law, there was no law like that. People just experienced God. God walked in the garden with Adam and Eve. God spoke with Abraham. God spoke with Hagar in the desert. God spoke with Sarah, with Jacob. They were with him. They didn't have laws. Now, this is kind of like if we're riding in a car with God and he's driving and then we kick him out of the car, but he doesn't want us to kill ourselves, so he puts up road signs and stop lights and paints lines on the road and just to show us how badly we're driving. That doesn't actually stop us from driving off the road. It's not like guardrails that prevent you from going off the road, but at least it shows you all how bad a driver you are. So maybe eventually you'll invite him back into the car and let him drive. We read Galatians this morning. Paul picks up on this same theme about why was this law given. Galatians 3:19, why was the law given? It was given to show people how guilty they are. Because he gives you this huge, big, long list of stuff, and eventually you realize, I can't do all this. And that's a very important moment, because that's when you realize you better get some help. And that's what he really wants, is for you to be in a relationship and ask him for help. Galatians 3:21, the law's purpose was to make obvious to everyone that we, in ourselves, are out of right relationship with God. That's how the Message translates it. Romans 3:20, the law is it is the straight edge of the law that shows us how crooked we are. So basically, the purpose of the law is to show us how unlike God we are, so that we can start to make the steps of getting to become like him. So that's why the law was given. Basically because we aren't like God, and we chose, or our ancestors chose, not to be like God the easy way. So he gave us the hard way of doing it. Does that make sense? You guys follow all that? Does it make sense that relationship and rules are kind of against each other? Not 100%, but they're kind of working against each other a little bit. Okay, with that being the case, why did Jesus say he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it? Because we hear all the time that the law, when Jesus comes, the law kind of goes away. In fact, in that same Galatians passage, Galatians 3 we're talking about, Paul says, now that Christ has come, we read this, We are no longer under the supervision of the law. Paul talks about that a lot. And especially those of us in the Protestant tradition who follow Martin Luther, whether we realize it or not. I mean, he took Paul's theory of the law and pumped it up on steroids and made it into this huge thing. I mean, Martin Luther basically set the New Testament against the Old Testament as if they were mortal enemies. And he's like, the Old Testament is just law, and the New Testament is grace, and the Old Testament's got to go because we're not under law, we're under grace. And he made it much too much like this, I think. Luther did. And in the Protestant church, we tend to follow that a little bit too much, I think. Jesus didn't see it quite that way. I mean, he saw himself and grace as the answer to the law, the fulfillment of the law, but not as if it's a war. Anyway, I think the main reason that Jesus views the law as a good thing and says, I've come to fulfill it, and he also says it's not going to go away, it'll go on, is because he is much more interested in the heart of the law than in the details of the law. He's much more interested in the why than the what, or the why behind the what. Just following the rules, he doesn't care if we can follow instructions. He wants to know where our hearts are, if we're interested in actually being in relationship. He looks at the heart. Later on in the Sermon on the Mount, raise your hand if you've heard this before. Always treat others as you would like them to treat you. You heard that? Yeah, that's Matthew 7:12. That is the law and the prophets. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. If you go through, like, Leviticus, and you find all the rules about if you've got a bull and your bull gores somebody else, but it didn't have a history of goring somebody, and you didn't necessarily know it was going to do that, then your penalty is less severe than if you had a bull that you knew was tended to be kind of wild, and it's crazy. But if you dig through all that, basically what it says is have enough respect for each other and enough love for each other that you don't let your bull run around and hurt people. It's like getting bogged down in the details is not nearly as important as the why behind. So treat people the way you want to treat them. That's the law and the prophets. In chapter 22 of Matthew, one of the religious leaders says, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, what does it say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. This is the greatest commandment. And a second commandment is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Right? On these two commands hang all the law and the prophets. Paul says the same thing in Romans 12:8 and 9. I like Paul. I tend to come back to Paul a lot. I know I do that. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be talking about Jesus and I keep getting off on Paul. But he says in Romans 12:8 and 9, owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. And then Matthew 23. Jesus is finally fed up. I mean, he's done. He can't even. The Pharisees have driven him to the point that he's like, all right, look. And he just kind of goes off on this rant against the Pharisees. And he accuses them of being hypocrites. He's actually kind of rough, man. He's not the nicest person. If you read Matthew 22, it's like, wow, Jesus is coming out. But he's not just upset that they're not practicing what they're preaching. He's also accuses them of just kind of going through the motions of what they're doing with no real understanding of the why behind the what. I mean, he says to them in Matthew 23:23, you are careful to tithe even the tiniest part of your income, but you ignore the important things, justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but you should not leave undone the more important things. So even if you're technically obeying the letter of the law, but with no understanding of the Spirit, or no interest in understanding the Spirit, then Jesus is not as happy about that. Jesus is much more interested. But the main point is the specifics of the law all involve loving God, loving neighbor, and that's the main thing. And that's why that's not going to go away. That's why Jesus says, I came to fulfill the law, not wipe it away. That's not going to end. Love goes on forever, right? Love will always be. I mean, if we live We talked last night about eternity and how it doesn't end and how that's kind of a freaky thought if you think about it. It's like we can't really comprehend something that it's just never going to end, but love will always be the law. No, if you're in relationship with someone, it will always be the right way to be in relationship, to treat them the way you want to be treated, to be loving. So that's why Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish it, I came to fulfill it. I am love. God is love. That's the answer to everything. All right, so why was the law given? How come it's still around? What does this mean for us? How can we possibly be more righteous and be perfect the way Cindy was talking about to the kids this morning? How can we be 100%? I mean, good enough is maybe okay to us, but no, that's not good enough. How can we be there? Well, what's the answer? Everybody knows the answer, right? We're in a Christian church, we know the answer. The answer is Jesus. Jesus himself is the fulfillment of all of that stuff because he is love. Matthew 1:23 says Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. He can offer us the righteousness we need. His sin-free life, sacrificial death on the cross, and resurrection to glory can be considered as ours. That righteousness, there's a theological word, imputed. Who said the word imputed this week? Anybody? I didn't mean it. I just now. But imputed means you get something that's not yours and it's reckoned as if it is yours. That righteousness of Jesus can be imputed to you. It can be reckoned as if it's yours when you put your faith in him. And in that case, excuse me, you don't have to worry about keeping the individual commandments of the law. You don't have to worry about, being good enough. You don't have to worry about how maybe your tile is down a little bit. It's not quite level if you're trying to do things like that. Matthew 1:21, he will save his people from their sins. He will save you. Matthew 6:33, strive first for the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things that we worry about in life will be given to you as well. We already read the golden rule, and everything do to others as you would have them do to you. Twice in a short span in Matthew 9:13, and then again in 12:7, Jesus quotes Hosea 6:6. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So people who are saying, okay, what's the sacrifice for this? I'm not really interested in the specific sacrifice. I don't care about bulls. I want you to show mercy and not be in a situation where you have to keep sacrificing bulls all the time. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens. Who in here is weary? Who's carrying a heavy burden? The kids raise their hands. That homework, man, it's terrible. I understand. No, if you're carrying a heavy burden, come to me. I will give you rest, Jesus says. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Jesus fulfills the law on our behalf. When they're doing communion the very first time in Matthew 26:28, he says, this is my blood, which is poured out to forgive the sins of many. First song we sang this morning, there's power in the blood. Was that the first song or second song? One of the songs we sang this morning, power in the blood. There is power in the blood, and that is how you become Christ-like, and that is how you become good enough and perfect, and be perfect as my Father is perfect, as Jesus says in the last verse of Matthew chapter 5. So if we put the verse back up again, please. He's not going to abolish the law because love is never going away, and that's the basis of the law. Anyone who breaks that commandment is in trouble, but here's the good news. Your righteousness can surpass that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Maybe not Pastor Shannon, but the other religious leaders, professional religious leaders, because they were trying to do it themselves. They were trying to come up with a righteousness from within them. They were trying to look at that list of stuff that God had given and check things off on the list. Remember, Cindy, we were talking about checking things off. You can't check off enough things. Like she said in the children's sermon, you can check off everything, but you can't check off the biggest thing, which is your attitude of love, because we all have sin in our hearts. We know that. And that can't be overcome by anything that we do ourselves. So there's bad news here, You will not enter the kingdom of heaven unless your righteousness is a lot better than the most holy people you can think of. But the good news is, it's really easy to be more righteous than them when you put your faith in the one who is righteousness. Amen?
Amen.
Louder. All right, good. Richard?